Hey guys!
Hey everyone, we made it.
Oh, I didn't grab our seating square.
We'll get it.
Okay.
How y'all doing? So we did this last week where we went live on Friday and we answered y'all's questions from the week, and it was fun. So we thought let's do it again.
Made for a
So
good lunchtime activity for
Yeah.
us.
so we'll get started. We got some questions from the week that we got on YouTube throughout the week. So we've got those ready to go. We'll go through and answer those, and then if y'all have questions, just throw them in the chat. So it's gonna be super informal. Just gonna be hanging out for the next hour and a half. I don't know. I'm just gonna see how it goes.
However long we feel like talking.
Yeah.
Or you guys feel like asking questions.
Yep. So let's go ahead and jump into some of our questions. All right. So our first one. Which one's the question?
Oh, what planting zone are you in?
Oh, what plantings? So we are in Zone 7 in Oklahoma. So our app is actually built for anyone in the United States. It'll calculate planting dates based on your nearest weather station. But when you're seeing our content and our videos and all that, that's coming from Zone 7 here in Oklahoma City. So
And then the next one from Lisa. She was asking about rosemary. That was my rosemary video. And any tips for keeping it alive inside during the winter? So she must be somewhere up north.
Yeah. Well, even like our rosemary, we lost most of them this year because really the thing that...
Depending on the variety, I guess, too.
Yeah, and depending on the winter, like what happens. So our winter, this past one, we had some pretty chaotic temperatures that yo-yoed back and forth. So we went from like 0 to back up to 50s and like this wild swings, and that really impacts rosemary. They do not do well with that. So
I will say the best luck that we had with rosemary was one that we put in a smart pot.
Yeah.
Which most of ours are always in smart pots anyways, but we put it in a smart pot and then we kept it into the shop and actually kept it on a what are those things called?
Pallet.
Yes, pallet. And we would just move it in and out whenever the weather got nice and water it that way and all that. That was the best luck that we ever had with rosemary whenever we had to bring it inside, at least. But we most of the time we leave ours outside here in Zone 7, at least, because we have the variety. The rosemary ARP is one that does really well here in Oklahoma, and that's the one that we have and that we grow, and it's done really well for us. So,
yeah, that's the number one tip for rosemary, is have it in like a smart pot or container so that you can move it inside in the winter, like when you have those days where we have those wild swings that go back and forth. All right. Next question. Oh, we have chat. Sorry. What type of soil mixture? Great question. So, oh, thanks. Good job.
how do I take off?
Well, we're still trying to figure out this software. Bear with us. All right, we'll get this.
Just click on it.
Yeah, there we go.
Yay. Okay.
All right, so we got a question from the chat. So they bought a 1 gallon smart pot. They're looking to start some herbs indoors. What type of soil mixture would they recommend? So our soil mix, we have a lot of blog posts and videos that like really detail it, but at a high level, it's basically this. It's Mel's Mix from Square Foot Gardening. If you've never heard of Square Foot Gardening, it is like the most popular gardening book. It's the gardening book we started with. It was written by an engineer. We love it. And I'll talk more about that later, I'm sure. But the soil mix that he recommends that we go with is basically a potting soil mix. You're basically just making your own potting soil. And it's a mix of compost and vermiculite and coconut coir. Now you can substitute peat moss for coconut coir, and you can substitute perlite for vermiculite, but we don't really do that. We usually stick with that mixture. We make it in like big batches, in like IBC totes, so we have enough for the whole season.
Or on a tarp, also.
Yeah, tarp works well
mixed
too.
It on tarps.
Yeah, when we lived like in the city and we were first starting, that's how we mixed it. Our garden, like we're on 5 acres now, and my OC, like we're trying to plant gardens everywhere. So we're trying to like have a lot out here. But on that scale, tarps work really well for mixing it all together. So you basically just mix all those ingredients in buckets. You just like have a bucket where you put the ingredient, fill it up, dump it in, do that for each ingredient, and then you mix it all equally. The most important part of that is compost. Get high quality compost. Please do not buy compost from like a big box store in a bag, because it's been sitting in a warehouse and the life in there is probably dead. So like support your local nurseries and your local compost places. Just search for compost and Google Maps or something and you'll find it. And those places have high quality stuff. Like here in Oklahoma City where we are, there's this place called Minute Materials that has like 4 different types of compost. One of them comes from the zoo. Like, so you're getting like elephant poop.
It's really fun. They call it zoo poo.
Yeah.
We love having that.
All right. We got to catch up on the questions now. 1 second. All right. Tundra, I've never grown a garden. Please help. We are here to help. That is the purpose of our app. So start by downloading our app, please. We built our app along with a couple of friends because we started gardening. We were right where you were when we started. We had never grown a garden before, but we knew we wanted to. And as soon as we started tasting food of the garden, we got obsessed and we ended up here. So please download our app. Everything we know about growing food and everything that we've learned and everything that we wanted to, well, it's all in that app. So it's called From Seed to Spoon.
And don't feel overwhelmed. There are so many, I don't know, there's a lot of tips and tricks out there, but just start simple is the best thing that I can tell you. And start just by thinking about like the types of things that you like to eat in the kitchen. And then you will feel more empowered to grow that in your garden and want to take better care of that. So I think I always recommend that's a really good place to start. And starting herbs also. I think herbs is always a really good place to start because they're one of the more easy things that you can grow.
Like just go look at the back of your Italian seasoning that's in the pantry and try and grow those herbs and make spaghetti with those herbs instead of Italian seasoning and you will be hooked for life. That's all it takes.
Yeah. And just keep it as simple as possible. And so for the first year, like we only had, I don't know, 2 4x4 raised beds that first year that we started out. And I think that the best that you can do to just keep it on a small scale, just to get yourself going, is the best thing you can do. And I would highly recommend Smart Pots. If you haven't heard of Smart Pots before, they're these fabric raised beds that you can just open up, unpack, put soil in, and you're good to go. So it's super simple. They have all sizes from like the one gallon all the way up to 100 gallon. So you can get a bunch of different sizes there too. Makes it really easy. So you don't have to build any wooden ones if you don't want to.
Yeah, you can get started. Like you could go out like tomorrow, get everything you need, have your garden planted, and just be staring out on Sunday like, look what I built, and just be so happy. So, you can do that with a 4x4 too. I'm not very handy. I don't build things very well, and those wooden raised beds fell apart on us after like 3 or 4 years.
And I definitely couldn't have built it. So
you could have. Great question here. What's a cheap fix to keep critters? Not necessarily cheap. It's $70, but a motion activated sprinkler keeps a lot of things that like to dig out of raised beds. Now, another thing is if you're having things dig up from below, you can put hardware cloth at the bottom of the raised bed. Just cover that with like hardware, like cloth. It's or chicken wire might even work just as well too. Something like that below the raised bed.
Or if you have a smart pot.
Yeah.
we've never had anything be able to dig from below in a smart pot. So those are always great too.
Got a question here. How to revive a tomato seedling you may not be able to, and it might be stunted, unfortunately. But here's why I'm just being honest with you and why I'm being real with you, Shasta. Because in the past, we've tried to revive plants that were close to the brink in April, and it just never really did well. And I ended up wishing in May that I just would have gone and just bought another tomato plant for $1. So that's typically what we do if we have a plant that we really goofed up on. Sometimes we just have to bite the bullet and go to the nursery and get another plant. Or what we usually have going in our seed starting areas, we have rotations going. So we have backup tomatoes and backup peppers in case we goof up, because we're going to goof up. We always do. We're not great gardeners, y'all. I'm sorry. We're just not, like, we forget to do things sometimes. That's why we built an app to help us. Yeah. And that's why we're building things like reminders coming into the app soon so that we can help, keep us from doing that kind of stuff too. So, yeah.
This is all for us also. So it's not just for you.
Can I put green beans in with my zucchini? I wouldn't do that. I think I would just give zucchini its own big smart pot. And then if you want to put something else in there with it, put some herbs or some companion plant flowers, because that'll help keep squash bugs away and squash vine borers. And those are going to be the bane of your existence at some point when you're growing squash. So I would we like to grow bush beans like in a 4x4, we'll have the whole thing full of bush beans because they grow up and support each other. If you just have like a couple of bush bean plants, they're going to fall over, they're going to get damaged, but they help kind of support each other whenever they're all next to each other. So we typically do it that way. And if I am going to companion plant around it, it's going to be things like we've done some radish around it. I'm trying to remember what else we've done. Typically, we just kind of have its own area, and it might have. Do you remember times we haven't just planted corn maybe around it? I don't know.
Yeah, I don't.
Because that's one thing about bush beans we try and think about is we try and plant them next to our plants that are going to be heavy feeders. So corn needs a lot of nitrogen. Beans take nitrogen out of the air, put it in the soil. So we want them to be around things that are heavy feeders. So, if you're planting zucchini in the ground, I think it probably is a good idea to have beans nearby. And hopefully some of that nitrogen can leach over. But if it's in a smart pot or something like that, I would just like that zucchini is going to need every inch of soil it's got. And I would, zucchini that's in smart pots, we typically grow vertically. We put like a T-post in the ground and then help it grow up that T-post. So that's usually what we do with that. Question here. Biggest struggle is getting lavender to germinate. So Carrie had a video this week that talked about rosemary and how difficult it is to germinate.
I feel like lavender is very similar to rosemary.
They're in the same family, I believe.
It's very difficult to germinate, and it's one that we typically try to buy as a transplant just because it's one that's really hard. And yeah, I'm sorry. I don't have a lot of really good advice to get it to germinate besides buy a transplant, which is what we do for a lot of our herbs.
Yeah, and for rosemary and lavender, I mean, this really applies to like the woody herbs, like rosemary, lavender, sage, oregano, thyme. On those, we're buying transplants to start, and then we're taking cuttings from our own plants and we're propagating, and we're making a whole bunch from that.
So we try to start with one of the bigger plants, so that way we can have more amounts to cut from and propagate new plants.
Best homemade fertilizer tea for vegetables. So when we first started, we did a lot of those. What I ended up learning and what there's a really good YouTube channel called 1 Yard Revolution. He did some really good science-based stuff on this and worked with some professors to test it. And what he came to the conclusion of, and what I did on as well, was that it was really no different than just using compost every week and letting the rain in the compost. I'm sure there are people out there that disagree, and that's fine. I'm not here to argue about it. I'm just saying that's what we've kind of found. We've had plenty of success just using compost and then using organic fertilizers like Espoma. That's pretty much exclusively what we use for fertilizer, which they're just pretty much using bone meal and blood meal and some other nutrients and stuff. So that's what we stick to with fertilizer. It's always brought us success. Now, we have done some like worm tea type thing. So I've thrown some worm castings in with to make some tea with when we do like our fish fertilizer, when we're wanting to add some liquid nitrogen. That's about the only time, but really just compost goes a long ways. Can you use 5-gallon buckets from Home Depot? I wouldn't. So it depends on where you live. If you live in a temperate climate where you're not getting into the 90s and 100s that much, it'd probably work fine. In Oklahoma, it does not work because it gets very hot here in the summer and they just do not work well. That's why we switched to the smart pots, because we tried 5-gallon buckets the first year. I mean, I'm a cheap person. I do everything DIY, and it takes
5-gallon buckets. It's very similar to pots too, but these 5-gallon buckets, unless you like drill holes also in the side and the bottom, they're not going to drain well. And then, they're really going to struggle, is what we found in the past.
Yep. Are wood chips and mulch the same thing? I mean, mulch is you can use anything for mulch. Our favorite thing to use for mulch is actually shredded leaves. So, but wood chips are a good mulch as well.
He's also trying to find it for free. I saw.
Yeah. So, great tip here. Wood chips you can normally get for free at your local compost facility. So if you're in Oklahoma, in Norman, there's one where you can go down there and you pull your truck in and they dump a giant load of wood chips in the back of your truck and you drive away and it's free. They have compost. I don't recommend buying that because there's no telling what goes into that, because people are bringing their stuff in from all over, and there's all sorts of chemicals that could end up in that. So I see some other questions about compost, so I'll go ahead and kind of address those while we're there. You can buy compost, and I do recommend doing that your first year because it takes a while to make your own compost. So start by buying a high-quality compost from a reputable place that's close to you. If you're not sure where that is, like I guarantee you there's a gardening group on Facebook that is for your area, go in there and ask them where they buy compost. That's kind of where we learned about places like Minute Materials here in Oklahoma. But that's where I recommend going. Somewhere that's close to you, get a variety of sources. You want a compost that comes from vegetables, a compost that comes from plants. From animals, from different types of animals. You want to get as many different sources as you can. When we lived in the city, we had rabbits. We still have rabbits, but when we lived in the city, that was one of our only farm animals, if you will. And they make amazing manure that you can use in the garden immediately. So
we had Flemish giants, so they were the biggest rabbits we
Yeah.
could have, and then they gave us a lot of compost.
yeah,
We
they're like
loved it
18
too.
pounds. They're so cool.
And rabbits are one that's really great too because you can add it directly to your garden too. You don't have to wait for it to break down. So that's something I highly recommend, even if you live in the city. Also,
Questions about trellising tomatoes. Maybe if it's a smaller tomato, you might be able to get away with that, but you're going to be heartbroken if you get some big winds and it goes south on you. So I really recommend doing a stronger support than you think you're going to need. Some cheap options for this are, in the past, we've always been able to find bamboo for free on Craigslist from people that have bamboo that gets overgrown. And then I think one time I had to go out and help the guy chop it a little bit, but that was fine. I filled up the whole back of my truck with it. So
we still have some of that bamboo laying around.
Yeah, we do. So there's a lot of different ways. Our favorite way to trellis tomatoes is with cattle panels, and we create arches out of them. We have a lot of videos about that. Just search for cattle panel arch from Seed to Spoon, and you'll find that. We have a lot of videos showing how we make that. Those are our favorite way to do it, though. One second, just looking through questions here. Thanks for all the nice stuff y'all are saying. They're not questions, they're just nice stuff. We really appreciate that. Thank you. Here we go. Good question. Josh. Not much of a cook, so no idea how to use herbs. We did not know how to use them either, and we goofed up in the beginning. And I'll tell you some things right now, don't use too much rosemary because it goes a long ways.
He ruined that. He ruined me on rosemary for at least a year because he put way too much rosemary in. What was it? You put it in? You put it in something. It was it was in the Instapot. It was in the Instapot. I think it was.
Is a meatloaf or a roast or pot roast or something.
Whatever it was. I was like, oh, this is way too rosemary, and then I couldn't eat rosemary for a year. Now I love it again. So don't do that again. But yeah, it's really easy to go overboard with some of them. So
start with thyme.
Start small.
Because it is the
you can never have too much.
She does the thyme joke every time I talk about thyme. Every single time.
I have to.
That's why I love you.
I have to.
You're fun. I'm gonna say it again. You're gonna laugh again.
Yep.
Okay. So thyme is the herb that is the least potent, if you will. It's the friendliest to cook with. Start with that, and then branch out into oregano. Greek oregano is pretty strong. Spicy oregano is legit spicy. Put it in black beans. But check out our app. We have a recipes tab where we show all this. So if you go into rosemary or oregano in our app and you go to that recipes tab, or if you go to blogs or videos in that tab, you're going to see all the stuff that we've made over the years showing how we use all this stuff. So
basil is another really good one too. Yeah. And I know everybody probably gets tired of me talking about cinnamon basil, but I love it and it's my favorite. And it's so easy to use, and everybody is always a huge fan of it. Even the kids, they love it. Whenever I make sweet potatoes, carrots, anything like that, I always go and get some cinnamon basil from the garden, and then I just chop it up, put it on top. It's amazing. Tastes fantastic.
And pesto is something that you can make from pretty much every herb. We have a video showing how to make it.
Sage pesto.
It's real simple. Favorite. You just take some fresh leaves, some mozzarella, some garlic, some olive oil, some pine nuts, throw it in a little mixer, whatever little mixer you got. It'll work. And then it's so amazing.
It's an easy way to preserve herbs that way too, although ours never lasts long enough because we have us and then 4 kids, and yeah, it's always demolished within a day or two of making pesto.
Great question here from Denise. So what you're talking about here is companion planting, and this is another reason why we built the app, because trying to keep track of all of this got confusing at times. So if you go into the app and you go into, I don't have it set up to show the app. Darn. Well, if you go into the app, can you pull it up on your phone and we'll just hold it up to the camera and do that?
Yeah, so we'll be real fancy.
Yeah, we are. So when you go into any plant, and then
Here, I'm
there's
already
this
on
friends
spaghetti
tab.
squash.
So
Let's see if I can.
yeah, it's working. So there is
Backwards,
this. It's
but-
backwards. We all can get it. There's this friends tab in the middle that shows
Right there.
you.
Wee.
So yeah, that shows you the good companions and the bad companions for each plant. So one of the reasons why we built the app was to have a place for all of that. We have some new features that will be coming in the future about recommending things and different all sorts of stuff that'll be using that data. So
Yeah,
stay
this is
tuned on
definitely
that.
something that I needed the app for. And I still do. I pull it up whenever I'm out there planting. I'm like, oh, what should I plant over here next to the peas? And I pull it up and I'm like, what are my options? And I'm like, oh, I'm going to plant radish today next to the peas. So, yeah.
Shout out to Megan here. This is a great tip. Chip Drop is a service that connects you with local arborists. So as they're out trimming trees and stuff, they can have an option to come drop it off at your place and save some gas money. And with gas prices the way they are right now, a lot more arborists are hopefully taking advantage of that. So we have gotten 2 or 3 drops from Chip Drop in the past. So definitely check that out. That's a great tip, Megan. Thanks for.
And it really too depends. We've had great success whenever like signing up and we immediately get a drop. Sometimes we sign up and we have to wait a year. So it really depends on your area, what's going on. So yeah, sometimes it works great. Sometimes you have to wait.
Question here about strawberries, which is timely suited because our strawberry video is going out today. We recorded this yesterday with Junior. He loves strawberries, and
It's his favorite.
our recommendation for strawberries is to plant them in the biggest smart pot that is big, wide ways, like not necessarily tall, but like the round raised beds, like the 4-foot ones, or we've got like a 1,000-gallon one that I don't even know where we got it, but it's just this giant. But plant it in as big of an area as you have, and let the runners take over. And then eventually, in like 2 or 3 years, you're going to have a really nice strawberry patch, and they're growing on their own and making their own new strawberries, and it's going to be awesome. So that's what I recommend.
Yeah, we had these in a 100-gallon smart pot at our old house, and they took over the entire area within a year, I feel like.
So this is a great question here. They have a 4x4 raised bed. What goes well in that space? So what I recommend doing is really taking a look at square foot gardening. We have all the information about it in our app. And basically what it means is you take each square foot of that garden bed and you divide it into a square foot. And then that square foot, you can plant whatever you want. And it has its own, and each plant has its own spacing. And you can be smart about it to where you do companion planting and you mix things around. And it's a really great way to get started because it helps you really focus on trying to maximize your space and lets you try out a lot of different plants. So some of the tips some of the advice we give on what to choose as far as that are, start with things maybe they're easy. Radish is very easy. Lettuce is typically pretty easy. It's probably too late to plant it down in Dallas where you are right now, but beans would do really well for you right now. I would plant some of those in there. I would definitely do some herbs. So whatever herbs you like, I would throw those in there. Carrie is going to say you should probably throw a flower in there, like a marigold or something for companion planting.
Yep.
You could throw a tomato on the corner and let it go up the side of it and have its own space. Make sure it's on the north east side of the bed, though. Northwest side. That way you're shading the plants in the afternoon and not in the morning. So those are the kind of considerations that you want to take whenever you're starting out. We have a bunch of blog posts that went out recently that talk about some of the easiest things to grow, some of the most cost-effective things to grow. Those are kind of things we've been making a lot of videos talking about. So check those out. This is a great tip here too. Composting with earthworms. That's something we did when we lived in the city. We did a lot more than we do now because now we're on a farm and we have a lot of animals. So we don't really have to. There's plenty of worms in our compost. We have compost piles everywhere from we just bunch manure up. So like we don't have to do that anymore. But when we lived in the city, it was a crucial thing to our success in the city was doing that. And we put a pretty big scoop of worm castings in every planting. And it definitely paid off.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Yeah.
And it was fun to have too.
And honestly, we need to get back to doing more stuff with worms. I think we relied a little too much on what we get from our animals. So I think worms are something we can get better at too. Okay, so starting seeds indoors and have tiny little black bugs flying and crawling around the soil. Okay, so a couple things. They probably are bothering something. They're probably eating the roots. So they're not, the adults aren't, but they're laying their eggs, and the eggs are eating the roots of the plant. So it's definitely causing a problem.
And they're pretty annoying too. I
Yeah,
hate this.
yeah, they're hard. Now here's how we handle them in our areas, and we've had pretty good success with this. The first tip is using a fan. So we mount fans on the side of our seed starting areas. That helps. That wind makes it harder for the flies to navigate, and they're going to go somewhere else. So that's the first tip. Diatomaceous earth is another thing you can use around those areas. That'll help. Espoma has an organic spray that you can use as well. You can also make some of your own with soaps and different essential oils and things like that. Um,
Also, make sure that you're watering from below only too, and not watering from the top. And that'll help a big deal too. And if you're still finding that there's issues too, you can put some water into the bottom of it, let it soak up for about 10 to 15 minutes, and then dump out the remaining. So that way you don't have as much water residual left around for them.
Hey Jen, I'm glad you commented here. So this is something I do want to comment on here. So we were looking at the logs, and 3% of Android users are running into this problem. And we spent the past month trying to figure out what's going on here. Jan, you must be in that 3%. Please reach out to us at info@seedtospoon.net. We have some things that we've tried that have worked for other users. It's actually a bug in the Google software. They released a bug in January, which perfectly coincided with our new logo. So it made it look like it was something that we did with our update. I promise it was not. There are 2 bugs out there that have been identified by Google that they are working on. And it basically boils down to what other apps are installed on the phone as well. So if you have things that are basically scanning your phone as you're in a browser, which I mean, that's what they're doing. Things like LastPass or password managers. There's a whole host of apps that can cause this. And it's
But email
yeah.
us at
Yeah.
info@seedtospoon.net, and then we can help you out.
Yeah, we'll help you get to it. But I just want to address this because I've seen a couple comments, and we've gotten some emails about it, and we've worked with everyone that's emailed us, and we've been able to figure out what it is for most people. But you know, I just wanted to address this publicly because I did see your comment there, and I appreciate you letting us know, Jan, and I appreciate you sticking with us and giving us a chance. That means a lot to us. So thank you. Great question here about squash bugs and vine borers.
They are definitely the evilest creatures out there that we deal with. We're not a fan. So, vine borers, the biggest tip that we can give for you is whenever the plant starts to come up, slowly start to add some aluminum foil around that base of the plant. And it helps because they can't dig in there and lay their eggs. So, that's the biggest advice we can give for vine borers. Is there anything else for vine borers? I mean,
no, that's pretty much it. You can
Yeah.
also do insect netting over the whole plant.
but then your pollinators.
You got to
too.
make sure you pull it back off whenever they start flowering too. And like you got to build a pretty big dome to have enough insect netting to go over it and stuff. Now you could just kind of lay it over it. But that tip for the aluminum foil typically works pretty well. It doesn't always, but typically that works pretty well.
Yeah. And then squash bugs are evil. They pretty much you have to keep an eye on them. What we try to do is grow our zucchini vertically. And I know people are like, well, zucchini, it's really hard to trellis. You don't really trellis it. We put a T-post in next to it and just kind of like relax it up against that T-post. So that way we can see the bottom of the leaves a lot easier. And it helps for us and other natural predators for squash bugs too. And they hopefully won't want to lay their eggs there as much. But if they do, they're more visible to us and we can take care of it, or the beneficial creatures, and they can help too.
Yep. Drew wants to know how to get rid of ants. I would like to make at least a little bit of a case that maybe you shouldn't. Ants are one of those things that are both a friend and a foe in the garden. So if they're like the fire ants, like, yeah, I'd be getting rid of those too. But
They
if
are
they're
on both. They are a pest and a beneficials.
but if they're regular old ants, then now here is when ants can become a problem for us, is when they start trying to farm aphids, and they will legit farm aphids. Like they will help keep them alive. and they will, because they eat the stuff that comes out of the aphids. Basically, it's like the aphids produce like this sweet sugary substance. So that's when I start to try and move ants, and basically I'll just try and move the pile somewhere else, like out away from the garden, and then they'll figure out something else to do. But if you need to get rid of them, diatomaceous earth can help. Boiling hot water and pouring it over mounds and stuff like that, all that kind of stuff can help. If you have two different mounds, you can take a shovel of one, put it on the other, and they'll go to war together, and they'll handle it on their own. There's a lot of different things you can do like that with ants, but we try and think of our ants as friends, unless they're the fire ants, and then those got to go. But we haven't really dealt with any of those in our garden, thankfully.
Pretty lucky.
So great question here. Does smart pot soil evaporate easily? This is what I thought would happen too the first time I saw them, because I thought there was no way that was going to work, because the year before we'd planted in a lot of 5-gallon buckets and containers, and they just did not work well. So I had sworn off doing that.
And it's really hot here in Oklahoma too.
Yeah.
So I understand.
Mhm.
And we were like, there's no way a black smart pot is going to do well.
Yeah.
We were very leery, but it did. It worked great.
So, I mean, I think now here are some things we do with the smart pot that help too. On those days when it gets over 100, typically what we do is we have like a kiddie pool or something like that, and we'll fill it with about 2 inches of water, and then we'll put the smart pot inside that kiddie pool, and that'll keep it happy during the hot temperatures. So things like that help with the smart pots. But also, whenever the roots hit the side of the smart pot, they don't start circling around like they do in regular containers. They stop. They form these tiny little roots, and then they continue to suck in air and that kind of stuff. So we're a big believer in them. We're not sponsored by them or anything like that. We've used them for a long time, and we really believe in them. I think any type of fabric raised bed is probably going to work the same. So if you have those, like, I really recommend using those. We found really good success with them and good longevity too. And it's just easy to get going with a big garden in a hurry. If you have a bunch of scrap lumber laying around, use that. Like, don't let that, like, that'd be a great solution too. And just cover the bottom with cardboard and then put the soil on top of that, especially if you have Bermuda. The weed cloth that you can buy in the store that you're supposed to be able to put down does not work for Bermuda. We can personally vouch for that. So
tried that our first year. It didn't go very well.
Scrolling through question here. Yep, I got a tip here. So neem oil. Neem oil works great. The thing you got to be careful of is you don't use it when the temperatures get above like 90, because it can suffocate the plant. For cabbage, I'm betting that the pests you're having are little green caterpillars. And if that's the case, then there is this stuff that you can buy called BTK. I'm not even going to try and say the Latin form of that, because I will butcher it. I don't have enough degrees to be able to do that. So it's called BTK, and it's a naturally occurring soil bacteria that they've bottled up, and you can spray in your plants. And that bacteria targets caterpillars and is harmless to humans. And it works really well. You can also use insect netting. That works really well too, because if you see the little white moths flying around your garden, those are the ones that are laying the eggs for those caterpillars. So you can also pay your kids to catch the caterpillars. That has worked well when the kids are under 4 or 5. They are still excited about doing that.
Hey, 6 too.
Yeah. Yeah, but like at 7, they stop caring about catching caterpillars for quarters, we have found.
Oh, did you mention when not to use neem oil?
Yes. Yep. I led with that one.
Okay. I wasn't sure if I heard it or not, and I wanted to make sure.
The author's name, so Mel Bartholomew wrote Square Foot Gardening. So definitely check out that book. It's definitely worth the read. Some great tips here on herbs too that I saw. Compound butters. That's a good recipe. That's a good tip on the recipe amount. Carrie, you want to take this one?
Yeah.
I'll look for the next question.
So tips for starting peppers from seed is because soil is starting to get some fungus on it. So this is probably the biggest thing that I can say whenever you're starting seeds is to make sure that you water from below. And that will be the biggest thing that you can do to prevent any sort of fungus. I combined fungus and mold. Mungus. It works. It can prevent any sort of growth on top by watering from below. So making sure that it is drying out on top and it's not staying moist up on top. And also, I know we mentioned earlier having fans too. So circulating air as much as possible is always going to be really important to make sure that it dries up on top. So that way it's not a good environment for the fungus and it doesn't enjoy it. So.
Great question here about snails. So in the app, there's a section in there that talks about snails. There's specific products you can buy, but there's also just like, was it where snails was the beer in the cup thing? Yeah. Okay.
I remember there was one morning I went out and I set out all these. We had like little tiny little trays that we put out. I pulled some old stale beer in there, and it works really well. The snails crawl in there and I guess gorge themselves. I don't know what it is.
Yeah.
Do you know what causes it? I don't know, but
also like I've never like snails have really never had that much of an impact on our plants. Maybe we've just been lucky.
There was one time I remember, and it was when you were out of town, and I was out there setting these snail traps.
I remember that.
You're like, go set up all these traps. Go open a can of beer and pour them in. I was like, okay, and it worked really well. But yeah, tall beds, I'm sure will not like they just crawl up the sides.
Mm-hmm.
At least they did for ours. They crawled up the sides of the wooden raised beds that we had, and they were in there.
I've got a good question here about garlic. So plants to go in after garlic. So you typically harvest garlic in like June, and that's typically a pretty hot time to plant anything. Now the things that you can still get away with planting are going to be zucchini and okra and sweet potatoes and southern peas and sunflowers, zinnias. Those are the main things we're planting that time of year that are still doing really well. We're not transplanting anything. We're doing all this from seed. We're watering it a lot the first 2-3 weeks, but those things like the heat. It's not a good time to try. I think the mistakes a lot of people make in the summer is they try and transplant like a pepper plant, like straight from the nursery. Like you got to baby those things. You got to really harden them off. So anything you start from seed though, during those months that, those things I mentioned off will do well in that time. And that's typically what we transfer to in the summer. Plus those things are pretty hands off. And in the summer we like to go to the lake.
Okra?
I think I said maybe not, but okra for sure. The Three Sisters garden is a good, there's probably some smaller pumpkins you can still fit in, some watermelon, some cucumber. All of these things I've mentioned for the most part are pretty easy to grow. And we like that in the summer because we like to be able to go to the lake in the summer and stuff like that.
And it's also just really hot too. So you don't necessarily want to be out there, taking a lot of care of your plants, even though they need it, but you want to try and make it be as hands-off as possible.
Got a question here about starting seeds. So saran wrap would not be a bad idea before they sprout. That would help hold in the moisture. But as soon as they sprout, take it off. So we use these Biodome seed startings, trays that we got from Park Seed, and they have this venting system and everything, and like this plastic lid. But saran wrap would do basically the same thing. Just make sure you take them off after they sprout, or you'll have issues. But that'll help with germination, and it may help with making them germinate a little bit faster too. So it's worth doing. You just got to remember to take it off. You got to watch it because it can go south in a hurry if you leave it on too long. Composting in a 5-gallon bucket indoors. So composting really requires more volume. Like you're looking at like having to have like a 3-foot by 4-foot pile to really effectively make like compost on a good scale. I mean, I guess technically it's possible you could compost with that, but what I would do with the 5-gallon bucket is collect all your composting materials on a weekly basis and then take them outside and then start making your compost pile from that. Or now you need to mix some other stuff with it. We have guides all about that. It's pretty simple. You just need to mix some brown materials with green materials. So brown materials are going to be like wood chips and things like that have a lot of carbon in them. And then the green materials are going to be things like leaves and stuff from your garden and grass clippings that have a lot of nitrogen in them. And you mix those two together, and then that's how you end up getting
Coffee
compost.
grounds are also really good.
Yep.
But yeah, we usually use the 5-gallon bucket just for a temporary hold for our compost materials, and then we take them outside. So I've never composted in that small of an area before.
Yep. Blueberries. The number one tip for blueberries is that out of all the things in the garden, they are the most finicky about the pH of the soil, and they like it acidic. There's soil acidifier that you can buy through our Park Seed store. If you go into the app and go to blueberries, it should be at the bottom there. But if not, just go over to the store and search for soil acidifier. You'll be able to find it there. That's the number one tip for blueberries. We like to grow them in like a 25 or 30 gallon smart pot. They also don't like as much sun as blackberries or some of the other fruits. So they like some afternoon shade, especially if you're where it gets hot, like where we are. That's the number one. That's the main stuff I can say about blueberries there. Hey, Ginger, thanks for joining us. I'm glad you found us. We have a whole bunch of videos that cover everything we're doing from our garden. So if you go on over from our YouTube channel from here, Carrie puts out a new video pretty much every day. She's got something going out from our garden. So
or a seed starting area or
Yeah.
somewhere, depending on the year. Yeah. Always talking about something.
Yeah, we've been doing this for about 5 years now. So we've got right now we live in the country, but we used to live in the city. So we have a lot of old content from when we lived back then. So check that out. Great question here about garlic. So you didn't get it planted in the fall. Can you do it now?
Ooh,
Yes,
good
but there's a
trick.
bit of a hack you got to do here. So garlic wants to go through a winter before it starts growing. So you got to trick it into thinking that it went through winter. You do that by getting a bag and you put soil in the bag and then put the garlic in the soil and then put that in the freezer for like 3 weeks. And then take it out and then the garlic's like, hey, I went through winter. And then now you plant it.
Now take it out to your garden.
Yep. So that's a little hack you got to do with garlic. So it's a little late though. I mean, we're in April. So you could try
It's
it
worth a
though.
try.
Yeah,
That's
do
what
it.
I always
Not going to
say.
hurt. I mean, you just may not get very big bulbs or something, but it's worth trying for sure. Good tip here from Megan again. Megan's had several good tips. Thank you, Megan. Appreciate y'all jumping in here. Diatomaceous earth. We use diatomaceous earth a lot. Definitely recommend doing that. Powdery mildew. Typically, powdery mildew for us is caused by me watering the wrong way. So what I mean by that is when I water too often and too late at night. Whenever we water in the morning and we only water whenever the soil is dry, like up to 2 or 3 inches down, we haven't had issues with powdery mildew. Now, sometimes you can't avoid it when you get those heavy rains for 2 weeks, and it's tough. And you can do things like there's sprays that you can make. I think milk-based sprays because it adjusts the pH. There's different stuff you can do. We need to make a blog post about powdery mildew. We'll make a video about powdery mildew. But it's also it can be difficult. So forgive yourself if it goes south and the plant doesn't make it. We've lost a lot of plants from stuff like that in the past too. So typically for us, it's at the end of the season when we're seeing that. It's like zucchini in October, and it's like starting to get cold. So I'm like, all right, well, I mean, it was fun while we had you, and then it's gone. So another thing I want to say about garlic here is that if you don't forget about garlic chives and onion chives, because the green tops, like we use that more than we use we use both a lot, but I really like those green tops. So
that's my favorite.
And those are perennial and you'll have them all year and they grow really well indoors too. So, it says we went mute. Surely. Oh, so someone says we're not muted. Okay. Stu, you scared me for a second. I was like, oh no, that was like 20 minutes ago. Surely somebody would have called us if we've been on mute for 20 minutes. Okay. Sorry, scared me. All right. I think we covered it though. Let's go look see the other questions we have. We have not dealt with the invasive jumping worm, but I guarantee our chickens would handle it.
Yeah.
That sounds like that's an advertising worm. That chicken will be all over it.
See, we're lucky that we have the chickens to help us with a lot of our pests on the outside of the garden, but they can be pests too if we let them into the garden. So we have to keep them out of the garden and let them help us have a balance.
Here's a tip. I hadn't seen that, but that's a good idea, and I understand why that would work. That does make sense. So that's something we should try actually in our seed starting area is get a little bit of chip off of those dunks
Okay.
and just put it in there. I bet that will help. Good tip there. Brian, we don't show like pH numbers or stuff like that because some of that stuff is kind of what scares people off, in my opinion, when they first get into gardening. We try and make it where you don't have to necessarily think about that as much. Sorry, am I moving the thing? So we do say, like, we do call it out when you're looking at blueberries in there. We mention that it has to be more acidic, but if we don't call it out, then basically if you just
standard.
and if you just make that raised bed mix that we talk about making, then the pH is going to be in a range where you're going to be okay. I mean, sure, there's things like tomatoes that like things a little more acidic, but really, like, they do okay. And most of the fertilizers, you're gonna be fine with it if you make that soil mix. Now, if you're planting in the ground, it's a different story. Then, like, you need to go with your county extension and get like a soil test and find out what your pH is and all that kind of stuff. So, but if you're planting in raised beds and you're making your own soil mix, it's not as complicated. So that's why we don't really do pH type stuff in the app. But if that's something that y'all really want to see, like, reach out. We can always add stuff if it's something like that y'all really want to see. So, question here: best compost bins for worms. We really liked this thing called the Worm Factory 360. That's the product name. It was cool. And it's like this multi-layered tray system that the worms can go between and stuff, and you like rotate harvesting. Just search for Worm Factory and you'll find it.
And then Uncle
Jim's Worm Farm, I think, is where we got that and where we buy our worms from. Yeah. So that was a place we liked using, and that's what we use for our worm farming. Question here. So I think what you're describing here is leggy, and this happened with some of ours too because we goofed up with our lights. Yeah. So you can overcome it. Ours did a pretty good job overcoming it. And what we're going to do is we're going to plant them outside a little deeper than the other ones, but we gave them some extra time. We have a whole video that talks about how to fix leggy seedlings that we did about 2 weeks ago, and those plants just went outside today and they're looking real good. So
yeah, for the most part, most of them have recovered. So it is possible to help them out. And if you do have time to start over, that's great, but it's kind of getting towards the end of the growing season for cool season. So I'd say I would give it a try and keep trying to baby them through it.
Some good tips here from Susan. Yeah. That's a key thing too, to prevent things like the flies in seed starting areas, is to do a good job of sterilizing the pots that you use. And then if the soil, either use new mix or sterilize what you had in the oven. So some great tips there. Noel, I'm twice as loud as Carrie because I'm twice as loud in real life as Carrie. So ladybugs are great. We actually bought ladybugs on Amazon the first year that we got gardening. If you're going to do that, release them at night with plenty of water and plenty of aphids around to eat, or they will fly away. You will watch your $20 purchase fly off. But ladybugs are awesome.
Yeah, ladybugs are great. They help with a lot of like aphid issues.
Aphids primarily.
Yeah, we haven't had any aphid issues for a while just because we have a really good established colony of ladybugs, I feel like.
Scrolling again. One moment. So, great question here. You have pepper plants from last year. No, let them keep going. Great. Peppers are perennials, and like where they come from in the tropical area, they become trees. So they just die here because it gets too cold. So if you overwinter them, a lot of people do that. There's people that have pepper plants that they've kept for 3 to 5 years, and they basically named them at this point. Like, they're not quite in the will yet, but it's getting close. Like, that's how a lot of people feel about their pepper plants that they've saved. So
yeah, that's
good job.
Great. Yeah, good job for keeping those alive.
I think we did that one year, and then we saved it, and then we put it out too early in April, and then it died.
Sounds like something we would do.
Yeah, it does. Oh, the Smart Post compost sack. I have not used it. I love Smart Pots. I love that company, but you're not going to convince me that there's anything better than just making a pile on the ground where all the stuff is. You know, I mean, that's where all the microbes are. They're in the ground, so that's where I'm making the pile. Um, maybe there's something I'm overlooking. I love Smart Pots for everything else, but that's why I've not tried the compost sack. Again, Smart Pots. I love you guys, but that's just I got to be honest.
Oh,
Blossom
blossom
end
end
rot.
rot.
So there are two main reasons for blossom end rot. The most common reason is that you've watered too much.
Or got too much rain.
Yeah,
Which
yeah.
that's hard to control.
Because the basic root of the problem is that they're deficient in calcium. And that can happen in one or two ways. Either there's not enough calcium there, or it all got washed out. Or that it not necessarily got washed out, but there was so much water that the plant wasn't able to uptake it. You know, it's like the rate, like, that's basically the root of the problem. So if you didn't water too much, then you might need to add some calcium. Here in Oklahoma, calcium deficiency is very rare because we have clay soils, so it's not really something that happens here. But in other parts of the country, I'm sure it is. It's something that happens. So you can do a soil test to check on that. But watering is usually the main culprit for blossom end rot. And also, it's sometimes just something you can't control. Like if we get a ton of rain here for a week, then we just know that we're going to have some tomatoes that, that we're going to have
There's
to pull.
one year we had a lot of tomatoes, zucchinis, like a lot of things do it. And just because we had a lot of rain that season.
That's one reason why raised beds help so much, and like things like smart pots, because it helps control moisture. And also the soil mix that we talked about with vermiculite and perlite, that's the stuff that helps basically like
Drain
regulate
a little bit
moisture.
better.
Like that, those little like white pellets absorb water and then release it slowly, and it helps regulate things. So, and like you said, they drain better. Like all that stuff is why we don't really grow in the ground here in Oklahoma. The snails and slugs die happy from earlier. That was a good one. Elephant garlic. We love elephant garlic.
Elephant garlic.
Same type of thing. It's late for it, but you can definitely do the freezer hack.
Yeah, and we plant them. We plant them obviously a little bit more spaced out than we do traditional garlic whenever we put them in the ground because they grow quite a bit bigger. But yeah, we love garlic. It's all the same.
Desiree, thank you for the exact mixture. I knew it was a milk mixture. That's what it is. The 2% milk and water. Mix that together for the powdery mildew from earlier. Question here from Shasta. So seeds starting outdoors. So there could be a number of reasons for this. The first one could be that maybe you're planting them for the wrong time. So if you planted a tomato a month ago, then it's not going to, it doesn't like that. If you did spinach in May, that's not going to do well either. Like, so it's got to be at the right time. So make sure you're in the right window for that plant. Now they should sprout. They don't really need much nutrients to sprout. All the nutrients they need are in the seed. So if they sprout and they get going, and then they kind of stop after like 2 to 3 leaves and start to look a little yellow and just aren't really doing much, then you may be nitrogen deficient. And you need to add some nitrogen either via fish fertilizer or like one of these Espoma fertilizers. Espoma, like blood meal, is going to take a little bit longer to get going. The fish fertilizer that's in water is used almost immediately by the plant. It's pretty quick, at least. So I would recommend doing that. Those are the two biggest things I could think of as to why things wouldn't get going. But if you could like give us a little more details about the specific plants that you're having issues with, maybe I could give you a little more detail there. Great question, or great tip here. Basil, every single one of our tomato plants has basil, oregano, and thyme around it. One of those
and
plants.
Marigolds.
Yeah, but basil especially.
Yeah, basil, absolutely.
And they also help improve the flavor of the tomatoes that are grown nearby. It helps with disease resistance. The reason why these herbs help in general is because they so these pests find the plants through their sense of smell. So whenever they're looking for their tomato plant, they're smelling for it. And when you have basil all around it, then it puts these other scents up into the air, confuses them, makes it harder for them to find what they're looking for, and saves your tomato plant. So definitely a good recommendation there. Someone was asking us about earwigs last night too. They must be going around. They must be. Diatomaceous earth was what I recommended to her.
And also just clearing the base of the plant of any sort of mulch but making sure it is as clean as possible, no dead materials around it, because that's what they really like too. And that gives them a good place to hide. So we try to keep it as clean as possible around a plant if we notice they're having issues.
I'm bummed to see that the diatomaceous earth didn't work for her though.
Yeah.
So sweet potatoes. The biggest suggestion on sweet potatoes is don't plant them yet.
Well, depending on where you are.
I don't think there's any. Maybe Texas is
Yeah,
hot
maybe.
enough.
Or
Maybe
Florida.
Florida, maybe. Yeah.
I don't grow there, so.
But sweet potatoes, just make sure you plant them at the right time because they do not like the cold. Sweet potatoes are one of those things we like to geek out on by going to organic grocery stores and trying to collect different varieties because you can find all sorts of different colors and things like that. So there's like a purple sweet potato. I mean, I think normally they are purple, but they're like red, like dark purples. There's all the different shades.
I like having the different colors. It's fun. And the kids love it.
You know, Susan, we have not grown huckleberries yet, but we want to.
It's on our list.
For sure. Top 3 things. Oh, it's a tough one. Top 3 things add to Smart Pot. You know, I'm gonna have to say, I think a pepper and a tomato, like those two do really well in a Smart Pot, and they're things that are hard to grow outside of a Smart Pot sometimes. They can be, at least, if you plant them in the ground. So those are things that I would definitely recommend going. In the third, potatoes. Yep, you're reading my mind. Because the harvesting is so much better. You don't have to dig for them. You can just dump them out. And if you have kids, they love it. It's like an Easter egg hunt for potatoes, but they love it.
Along the same route, I would say think like root crops too. Things like carrots, just because we're more in charge of the soil that we make for the Smart Pot instead of in the ground. So it's going to be more loose. So the carrots are going to grow better. They're going to grow straighter, longer, just overall.
Yeah, it's a good call. You know, like strawberries, I don't think we'd ever plant them in anything other than a raised bed or a Smart Pot. That's another one too. I'm sorry, your 3 is turning into like 6 or 7, and now we're just gonna like
just put everything.
Yeah, we're just gonna name through every single plant. Squirrels.
Squirrel issues.
Those darn squirrels. Yeah, good tip here. Doberman, perfect name too. Doberman 58 says the Doberman kills the squirrels. Yeah. So, you know, squirrels.
Yeah, dogs.
Dogs. That's what we do. When we lived in the city, it was still dogs. Even though our garden was separated off, we didn't have all squirrel issues. The motion activated sprinkler might work. They might just play with it and make you mad. I don't know. You know how those squirrels are.
But we have a Premier One electric fence around our area, or their garden area that we have, and we haven't noticed any squirrels going past that yet. Now we have the poultry netting, so it's a little bit more dense. Is that the word I'm looking for? I don't know. Well, smaller holes, so they can't really go through it, and they don't want to go through it, and they can't go over it. So, yeah.
And with strawberries, you know, it's pretty easy to build a dome that would go over strawberries because they don't get very tall. So you could use PVC pipe or something like that to build a frame that goes over them, and then do like chicken wire or something like that over it. And that would help too. It's hard to do that with plants that get tall, but strawberries, it's pretty easy to build protection for them. We've also made pretty nice little cages by taking IBC tote cages and cutting them in half. That's worked well too. Great tip here from Becky on the blossom end rot, waiting a little bit before watering again after rainfall, like paying attention to that. This is one of the features that we are going to be working on this year in our app, is making it to where we can notify you when to water based on how much it's rained around you and doing things like that. This is one of the big focuses of what we want to be able to build, and one of the reasons why we're so excited to be able to work full time on this now. It's just a dream come true that we get to spend all of our time thinking about this app and working on it and doing this kind of stuff and hanging out with y'all. Like, yeah, this is awesome. So thanks for everyone for joining us. This is fun. We're gonna keep going, but I just wanted to stop and say thanks to everyone for being here. We're already at an hour, but I think let's keep going. We got some more questions here. We're almost caught up. We're only like,
oh, look at us.
Yeah, I know. We're like 5 minutes behind now. So we'll get caught up and then see if there's any other questions and then kind of go from there. People probably, you know, coming off their lunch break now, but there's other time zones. So we'll just kind of see. As long as you are hanging out with us, we'll keep hanging out. So Can you do grow rooms inside of an apartment? Do they smell? That's funny. Um,
We've done it inside.
yeah,
We have.
yeah.
I wouldn't say it smelled any. Now we did get
Depends on the
those.
plant. I mean,
Yeah, that's
yeah.
true.
If
That's
you're
true.
asking for, I don't know if we can get it for legality reasons. I don't know. That's
You
yeah.
can. The biggest thing I'd
Mhm.
say is make sure you have fans going
Yeah.
too to keep the air movement, so that way the water doesn't sit and go stale, because that can definitely start to smell. And then it'll also prevent those little fungus gnats too from coming, and you definitely don't want that inside your house. Which
Mm-hmm.
that's what we battled when we had them in his office at our old house. We had a big grow station set up in there, and we had all these little fungus gnats. Oh, it was horrible.
Yeah.
So yeah, just prevent that from happening and it should be fine. It shouldn't smell at all.
Yeah. Peas took longer to sprout than what was noted on the packet. And so carrots are notoriously difficult to sprout. Peas should not be though. Peas, as long as you kept them moist, they should be fine. And they're not as finicky as carrots are. With carrots, you like really got to keep them super moist.
So one
And
thing
that can be
we
hard
do
with
with
carrots.
is we have these little oh, what are they called? My mind went blank. The little burlap sacks. Yeah. So we put a little burlap sack over top of where we planted the carrots, and we water it in really well. So that way it stays moist while we're germinating, because carrots can be very finicky and it takes a while. So we just keep peeking underneath there. If it needs more water, we give it more water. And once they sprout, we take it off at that point. So that can really help. I don't know about the peas though.
Yeah, they should just. I mean, peas are generally.
Well, I'd say too cold, but
it's Colorado, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, we
But
planted our peas in the snow this year, and they
she dressed in a pea costume. Y'all got to go see that video. Somehow I talked to her and I was like, "Hey,
it was
you
a
should wear
snow
this."
day. The kids and I got dressed up, and we went outside in our costumes and planted some peas and carrots.
Y'all gotta check that one out.
But that's my only thought, is maybe it was a little too cold and it just took a lot longer, because I did notice that those ones that we planted in the snow took a lot longer to come up than the other ones. But
Larry, this is something a good point here. So the smart pots are going to dry out a little faster than raised beds, and I think what's happening here is that because they're able to get air from all around that smart pot from the sides, it's like they're just going through more gas basically. That's just kind of how it's just one of the natures of using smart pots is you're going to have to water a little bit more than you did whenever they were in like the wooden raised beds. So that's one of the reasons why, especially in the summer, we use like the kiddie pool trick where we put them in like 2 inches of water and kiddie pool in the morning on the super hot days. That's why it also matters what size smart pot you plant in. So like we're typically for a tomato, we're not trying to get away with planting in like a really small one. We're going to be planting in a bigger
20-gallon,
so it holds more water. So but I have seen that it's like a give and a take, because yes, it takes more water, but they also tend to grow better for us and bigger. So for us, it's worth it. What's our take on chlorine and tap water? I've been on both sides of this. I've been on the side of trying to neutralize it all and everything. We live in the country now, so it's not an issue anymore because we're on well water. What we did in the city a lot was we would water out of, and really like the biggest thing I want to talk about in this relationship is watering with water that's the same temperature as the air. That's really the important thing, and you can accomplish like two goals of like both getting rid of chlorine and doing that by having we have like big IBC totes that we fill with water, then we got water out of that. Or you can just have buckets you fill up and set them out. And the sunlight will neutralize the chlorine pretty quick, like a day or two, pretty much, maybe faster. Don't quote me on that one. I don't know the science well enough, but I know it gets rid of it. So that's what we do. That's what we did when we were worried about it. But I don't know. I mean, I think you can find both sides on the internet, and I'm probably not well versed enough to be able to give an educated enough answer about it. So, but my opinion in general is I try to avoid chemicals if I can.
We had a rainwater collection system at our old house, and I know some places you can't have rainwater collections, but we could at where we are. So if you are interested in doing something like that, we have a lot of YouTube videos that he made a few years ago about making that and how that worked and all that. And that was an easy way. We just took the rainwater and watered our plants with that sometimes too.
Potato tower. We've tried them. They never really worked the way that they look like they'd work on. They never turned out the way that Pinterest said they would. That's I've built all those fancy contraptions. Like we made like stuff out of 55-gallon barrels where we cut slits in it. And we did all those different towers. We've done all those different things, and we've really just settled on for the scale that we're trying to grow at. It would take a long time to build a whole bunch of those. Like we're just growing in smart pots. It's just way easier. So we just grow in like 25, 20-gallon, 30-gallon smart pots for potatoes. And it's just way easier. So
yeah, we start them out about halfway filled and plant them halfway filled, and then as they start to grow, we add some more soil in as it goes.
So they bought seeds, and what's growing is not what's supposed to be on the packet.
Interesting.
There are apps you can use where you can take pictures of plants, and it's supposed to tell you what it is. They're not always super accurate, but it can help. Like usually it'll tell you like it could be one of 10 different plants, and then you got to kind of figure it out from there. If it's something that is a typical garden plant, though, it may not be too bad. I don't know. Shoot us an email with a picture of it, and if I recognize, I'll tell you what it is.
Yeah,
I can recognize most of the common vegetable plant, like the garden vegetable plants at least. So if it's one of those, we might be able to help you out.
info@seedtospoon.net.
Yeah.
Send us a picture.
Yeah, just shoot that over. Well, I'll let you know.
Oh, good. She said the peas did sprout.
Oh, they just took longer.
Yeah,
okay.
They just took a long time.
Yeah, it can take longer for peas to sprout than lettuce and spinach for sure. Lettuce is fast. Peas can definitely take longer. Yep, the wood board trick that works for carrots too. We use burlap instead, but the wood board would work too.
That'll help keep out any cats or any sort of creatures out of it too.
You got to be careful with some seeds because some seeds require light to germinate, and I can never remember which ones are which on that. So the ones that do require light, you wouldn't want to do it for that. But you know, in a lot of plants, carrots are just one of the most finicky things to germinate. That's why a lot of people do that. But not very many other things are quite as finicky as carrots. You don't really need to do that on very many other plants. Beets can be that way too, but that's really the only thing that we're taking extra care on. I'm a lazy gardener. I don't want to have to do more work than I have to. So we only do that for carrots because we have to. Corn earworms burrowing into tomatoes. We haven't had to deal with them enough for me to know off the top of my head, but I know we have them in the app.
We do. I can pull it up. I got my phone right here. Yeah, I can't remember what we're supposed to. See, that's why I always have my phone when I'm out there.
Oh, that's the wrong one.
Oh, yeah.
Corn earworm.
Let's see what it says.
Lacewing wasps. BTK. Awesome. I was hoping that would be. So BTK, the caterpillar killer that I mentioned earlier, works on that as well. So I would use that for all caterpillar issues pretty much. I think we've pretty much hit the end of the questions we got. Now we're a little over an hour, so we'll probably wrap it up here. Again, I really want to say thank you to everyone for joining, for all of your questions. This was awesome. We're going to keep doing this, I think. Maybe not every Friday. We're going to try and do this every Friday. We'll try and stick to that Friday at lunchtime. Can't always do that.
Working well so far.
But hopefully y'all enjoyed hanging out with us. We've got some more classes coming up soon. We had a class last night that we broadcasted live on YouTube, and you can go back and check that out. We have another one on next Saturday at Scissortail Park in Oklahoma City. If you're in Oklahoma City, we would love for you to come out. We're going to have some of our goats with us. We're going to be giving away some smart pots and some plants. And we're going to have a good time out there at Sizzletoe Park at 10 a.m.
Yes.
Yep. From 10 to 11.
Yeah.
So thank you everyone for joining. I really appreciate this. This is fun. And it would not be fun if there was no one in here commenting. So it would be awkward because we'd be sitting here. So y'all made it very fun for us. And
And
really,
if you guys have any
great
other
questions.
questions,
Yeah.
please feel free to leave them in the comment section and we can pull from them for the next time we do this.
All right. Well,